Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Improving Security and Scalability with Blockchain and Edge Computing. I'm Shilpa Goswami, and I'll be your host for the day. Now, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, this session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to organizers or our speakers, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio video challenges, please check your internet connection or you may log out and log in again. An important announcement for a certificate of attendance. Participants need to attend the complete webinar to qualify for the certificate. Also, should fill in the survey form, which will be sent in the attendees thank you email and answer correctly the three multiple choice questions based on the webinar. The certificate of attendance shall be sent to you within the next 5 to 7 working days after the event. Our speakers for today's session, Dr. Mohi Ahmed. He is an eminent cybersecurity lecturer at Australia's prestigious Edith Cowan University, who has been educating the next generation of cyber leaders and conducting research to disrupt the cybercrime ecosystem. His research is focused on ensuring national security and defending against ransomware attacks. Mohi has edited several books and contributed articles to the conversation. His research publications in reputed venues have received more than 2,400 citations, and he was listed as one of the world's top 2% of scientists for his 2020-2021 citation impact. Mohi has secured several external and internal grants worth more than AUD 1.3 million and has collaborated with academia and the cybersecurity industry. He is regularly invited to speak at international conferences and public organizations and interviewed by the media for his expert opinion. Without any further delay, I would hand over the session to you, Mohi.
Thank you very much, Shilpa. I am absolutely humbled to hear all these praiseworthy words from you, but next time I'll send you only 3 lines. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this wonderful talk. And I'm sure all of you are excited to know more about this particular topic, how to improve security and scalability using blockchain and edge computing. So let's get to the point because I have a couple of slides to cover. So first thing first, we just need to understand what type of security we are talking about. And especially when we are in cyberspace, what are the problems we have? And as Shilpa mentioned in my biography, that I am particularly interested in ransomware. And this is because if you look at the cybersecurity incident history, if you look at last 10 years or even last 5 years, you'll find that ransomware attacks are the most damaging and most excruciating from victims' perspective. However, ransomware attacks are not where we have seen. It's evolving every single day, every single minute, every single seconds. So far, we have been looking at ransomware only. So in the traditional ransomware attacks, the cyber criminals are only interested in encrypting the victim's devices. They don't really care about what else are there in the devices. I just need my ransom. I will give you back the decryption key. Now, as I said, if you look at the title of this slide, the cyber criminals never ceases to amaze, because now they have moved this ransomware ecosystem into such a sophisticated level that they are calling it ransomware 2.0. They are now not only encrypting the victim's devices. Due to the rapid growth in information technology and software development, the cyber criminals now can snoop into the files sitting in those victims' devices. That's what we call ransomware 2.0. They are not only asking ransom for giving back the decryption key to regain access to the victim's devices, but they're also asking money or They're trying to blackmail these victims that, hey, I have gotten access to your personal files, which are really sensitive. If you don't pay me twice, or if you don't give me extra ransom, I'm going to keep on blackmailing you, and I'll try to leak this information online. This is what we see increasingly happening in the last couple of years, and that is ransomware 2.0. Now, I am not going to scare you with ransomware 3.0. However, that is really happening. How? Because ransomware attackers are really smart enough to understand the importance and the sensitivity of this information. So far, we have talked about one individual victim. What if the ransomware attack is on a popular enterprise? What if it is attacked on a hospital or any enterprises which are mission critical and in terms of a nation security and sovereignty? What happens? The ransomware attack is on the Parliament House. There are lots of sensitive data sitting there. So ransomware attackers are not only interested in the ransom because they are now worried because cryptocurrency is being tracked heavily and there are lots of work going on in this space. So now they are more interested in getting sensitive intel. I don't really care about the ransom or cryptocurrency. I really want to know what are the secrets you can give me to penetrate better your organization. And that's why the ransomware ecosystem is moving forward. But we are here to understand what type of security we should be improving. So last year alone, there has been a financial damage of 600 millions plus just because of these ransomware attacks. And I'm pretty sure all of us have received emails like this. Because at the end of the day, how ransomware attack is happening in the first place? The easiest way to launch these attacks are social engineering. And if you receive emails like this, hey, Mohi, you have an opportunity to join the Bitcoin code today. Ride the wave of Bitcoin and earn a guaranteed $13,000 in exactly 24 hours. Imagine that email is sitting in someone's mailbox who doesn't have any clue about cybersecurity or these type of scams. So what they can do, they will be obviously interested. And not to mention the pandemic has left us in a situation where we are really interested in quick cash. Every single business has been struggling. Most of the individuals, they have suffered a lot due to this COVID-19. So at this stage, the cyber criminals are exploiting this because we are spending more and more time online. So as we are spending more time online, we are also exposing ourselves to this type of cybercrime. So here's a simple math just to give you an idea why we are going to see increasing amount of ransomware attacks. I'm not really talking about other type of cyber attacks, just ransomware attacks. So look at this stat here. So malware installation as a service, which is a really big deal now. And it's quite common, as I said earlier in my presentation, that cyber criminals have taken this ransomware business into such a sophisticated level. Anyone is able to buy these type of services, malware installation as a service. So in the black market or in the dark web, anyone who is interested, they can buy 10,000 installs, meaning they can just spend $57 to affect 10,000 machines via this malware. And imagine among these 10,000 installs, if only 0.5% pay the demanded ransom, let's say the criminal is not that greedy, he or she only charges $350. And then, even then, you get $7,500 from those demanded ransom. And even if only 0.5% pays those ransom. And then ransomware is a service fee because it requires the cyber criminals to provide the decryption keys and a lot more logistics just to be safe and anonymous. Let's say it is 5%. Still, there are $16,625 left. Now they need to convert those bitcoins or cryptocurrencies into fiat currencies. Let's say cash out as a service fee is 15%. Still, there are $14,131 left. So imagine just by spending $57, you are walking away with 14,000 plus dollars. And that is more than 25,000% return on investment. There is no other business in this world which gives you that much return on investment. We have been hearing about real estate investment. We have been hearing about other type of investments, but no one or no type of investment gives us this much return. And just because of these reasons, we are going to see an increasing amount of ransomware attacks. Now, what are the cybersecurity professionals, researchers, academics like me, what we are doing? There are existing solutions. For example, we have anti-data exfiltration techniques, active network detection and response, lots of intrusion detection systems. We have self-learning artificial intelligence, and many others. But do you see any changes in the cybercrime landscape? It is not changing. It is rather going the opposite direction. The more we talk about the solutions and robust techniques or safeguards or safety countermeasures, we are going to see an increasing amount of cyber attacks because the cyber criminals are never going to stop. And if you look at the cryptocurrency space, just by Bitcoin, here is an absolutely astonishing upward trajectory. In 2011, just 2 years after when blockchain and Bitcoin concepts were coined by Satoshi Nakamoto, we are seeing almost 600 millions of US dollars plus just by the cyber criminals. They are taking advantage of the system. If we can't really stop this problem, if we can't really stop these cyber crimes, then we will see there are more and more upward trajectories in this space. So it started with, let's say, 1 million in 2011. And up until 2021, that was valued at 602 millions of US dollars. And God knows what is going to happen at the end of 2022. So you can understand this type of cybercrime is really shaking up. Now, from a computer user's or an internet user perspective, we don't really care unless we are affected by this type of cybercrime. But the victims, they have already faced the music and they know how much money they're going to lose. Now, why all these things are happening? Now, at the first place, we should be asking ourselves the question that what is so wrong about this ecosystem? Why we are looking at this type of crime? Yes, there are financial gains by the cyber criminals, but what is causing all this? So we go back to the basics. We look at how we can see ourselves as a victim. What are the platforms? What makes it easier for us to become a victim of cybercrime? So have a look at the Internet of Everything. What are the key components? We have seen a huge progress or rapid growth in the Internet space. We have seen rapid growth in the technology. We have seen a rapid growth in hardware, software, databases, networks, and not to mention RFIDs. All these components are making our life easier and easier. At the same time, we take great pride in saying, yes, we live in the Internet of Everything now. And as much as we want to enjoy the positive aspects of the Internet of Everything, we are not equally taking the opportunity of safeguarding ourselves. When Internet was first designed, no one really cared about cybercrime or cybersecurity or cyber attacks. Now, a group of bad guys, they are exploiting this system because at the first place, Internet was not designed to be secure. And now we're seeing millions, if not billions of dollars of losses in terms of cybercrime and their consequences. And now to give you a bit more on the ecosystem of cybercrime and how we can become more and more victimized. Why we should worry more about improving the security, why we should be worrying about the number one cybercrime. Because let's face it, without internet and the technologies associated with the internet, we can't really live. And we are going to see increasing usage of internet and internet of everything in our day-to-day lives. And here's the perfect example, which is internet of health things. This particular image tells you that just in the healthcare sector, we are going to see a lot of internet usage and internet of health things. So we can have better healthcare services, we can have better diagnosis, we can have better situation, we can have more and more happy and healthy lifestyle just because embracing internet of health things, making our physicians' life easier and making everything efficient. But we are not really worried about the consequences because we have no choices left. Have a look at this slide and see, according to Deloitte Center of Health Solutions, by 2050, we are going to see an explosion of senior citizens. Now, I'm not saying it's their fault, it's the fault of the system we have, and we have no choice left apart from embracing the Internet of Health things because the amount of senior citizens will be exploding. And to look after those senior citizens, especially for healthcare, we might not have that many healthcare professionals or healthcare service staffs. We have to rely on computing technologies such as Internet of Health things and so many smart devices we are looking at. Yesterday, we have seen a new stack of Apple devices, and majority of those have very strong focus on healthcare because we live in a world where we don't really have the luxury to go to a physician and have face-to-face meetings frequently. And it is not ideal in today's time and age. So we are bound to rely on the Internet of Health things in this context. And if we drill down into the IoT ecosystem, an average hospital room has almost 15 to 20 devices. And in next couple of years, we are going to see the number of IoT devices will surpass the traditional computing devices. So in one office room, there might be one computer, but in one hospital room, there might be 15 to 20 computing devices. Then you can just simply do the math. In a single hospital, how many smart devices, along with other computing devices, are there? And that makes us more and more vulnerable to the cyber criminals and the cyber crimes. And now let's have a look at some of the scary newses. There are 5 times more ransomware attacks on healthcare. Why? Because the cyber criminals know what are the pressure points. They know if Mohi's dad, who wears a pacemaker, because he has got heart conditions, and that pacemaker is wirelessly connected to the internet to transmit the data, and the doctors can analyze those data remotely. If the cyber criminal wants to exploit that, they can do that easily. And if they tell me that, hey Mohi, we have the control of your father's pacemaker, unless you pay us $1 million, we are going to kill your dad. What do I do? I have no choices left. So this is really scary, but this is happening. We really have to embrace these Internet of Health things. At the same time, we should not avoid these scary news. 25% of cyber attacks are caused due to these Internet of Health things. However, we can see only 4 to 7% IT budget in the cybersecurity, especially when it comes down to healthcare. The cyber criminals can tamper the CT scans, which will mislead the diagnosis and whatnot. Here is an example. So if you pay close attention to the left-hand side, the original dental scan, you'll find one of the wisdom teeth is horizontal, that is not upright, it's just lying down. But in the false image injected dental scan, we don't really see any wisdom teeth. Where did it go? So these type of things are really happening in the healthcare space. And to really prove or validate these attacks, which are really possible in healthcare space, here at ECU, we have investigated one healthcare IoT testbed, and we have set up 17 different types of devices which are used in healthcare. And we have found there are several vulnerabilities and attacks possible. And feel free to check out the data set associated with this investigation, and feel free to read our papers on ECU IOHT dataset. So up until now, I have touched upon the number one cyber attack. We really need to ramp up our security. We have talked about the increasing usage of Internet of Everything in our day-to-day lives. We have drilled down to the healthcare ecosystem, and we have no choices other than accepting the IOHT ecosystem, because we are going to see a population explosion. And to help all those senior citizens, we need to rely on computing devices. We don't really have that manpower. And that is exploited by the cyber criminals. So we really need to understand how we can look for potential solutions and how we can keep on increasing the quality of the services in the healthcare and IOHT. Now, apart from the security issues, we can also see that IoT produces big data. So I'm not going into the intricacies of big data, because we all know, as we are using lots of devices, all of these devices are using data. And just imagine, I mean, all of your devices have got some storage capacities. So a couple of years back, we used to have USB drives of megabytes. Now we have petabytes of USB drives. And that tells you that we are going to see an explosion in this storage, and we're going to see huge amount of data everywhere. Apart from the security issues, how do we deal with this data or big data in this Internet of Everything? We need to ensure the quality of services in this ecosystem, which is undeniable. So one of the emerging technologies, and now many of you might be interested. So far, I have talked about the security issues to set up the background and fundamentals of why we should be worried about security, and especially in healthcare, and why ransomware is so critical, especially in the healthcare sector. So one of the emerging technologies is edge computing. Although it might have been in the concept for almost a decade now, but it is now being implemented in many of the applications. For example, Netflix. Now, I'm not going into the application side, rather I'm going to stick to the improving security and scalability issues. So edge computing is going to help us solving the quality of service issues with the Internet of Everything. Now, if we go back to the example of those IOHT devices, and in a hospital room, we have 15 to 20 devices, all of which are internet connected. And imagine a situation where the physician is relying on real-time data from the patient. And some of the applications or some of the programs or embedded software are analyzing those data. And if all those data needs to travel back to the cloud server and then gets analyzed and then returned to the another device which the physician is using, it takes a long time. But we really need something which is real time. An operation is ongoing, the patient's life is at stake, and everyone is really worried and stressed out. We rely on edge computing just to ensure that quality of service, real-time analytics, real-time computation. We need low latencies, we need scalability, versatility, bandwidth saving, and fault tolerance. So this is the high-level concept of edge computing. Now, as much as we really want to take advantage of the edge computing, we again are not paying close attention to the security aspects. Security meaning cybersecurity aspects. Edge computing is really good, but it is basically bringing in a lot more devices which are connected to the internet. And as we are incorporating more and more devices to the ecosystem, we are basically making ourselves more and more exposed to the cyber criminals. Earlier, they used to detect, let's say, 10 devices. Now, they are detecting, say, 20 devices. So the threat landscape is increasing and expanding. Cyber criminals are now more interested because they can see lots of potential victims now. Edge computing is making ourselves more vulnerable. It is creating more integrity issues with the data. We might have the risk of data loss, and last but not least, we might have incorrect data storage. It is really complex, and especially when we connect the dots with the healthcare space, things can go wrong and patients might end up dead or getting wrong treatment. We don't really want that. So what are the remedies we can think of? We can think of remedies to solve the problem of edge computing. We are not really solving the problem of quality of service and security. We are trying to address the quality of service issues with the help of edge computing. And now edge computing is creating some problems which we need to solve. To solve that, we need something distributed, decentralized, shared, and last but not least, tamper resistant. If we can do that, yes, we can see better quality of healthcare services or any other type of IoT applications. Now, who can solve that problem, or what technology can solve that problem? Here comes the big gun of blockchain. I'm sure all of you are aware of blockchain by now. This is 2022. But to give you a sneak peek of blockchain, blockchain is nothing but technology which supports decentralized databases. It has got consensus protocols. It has got smart contract and cryptographic security. So in simple words, nothing can be tampered when things are in blockchain. So, and here is an example how tampering is handled. So since all the data you have are stored in blockchain, if you really want to tamper with anything, you can't really do that because it would be evident. And at the end of the day, no one is going to believe that tampered data because everyone has got their own copy of the data. So even if one computing device or one node in the blockchain network is tampered with, no problem. We have got all of our original copies. So this is how tampering is handled. And I'm not going into the intricacies of hashing or other stuff, but just to give you an idea that the problem we have with edge computing, the tampering issues, that can be solved using blockchain, the shared databases, decentralization, everything can be solved using blockchain. And by 2025, we are going to see an increasing amount of blockchain applications, and the approximate revenue is almost 20 billions of US dollars. So yes, we are living in a very interesting time now. We can see the emerging technologies like edge computing and blockchain. Now, still, it's not that good news yet. So, what are the challenges of blockchain? So, we started with IoT, then we looked into IOHT, we looked into ransomware attacks, number one cyber attacks. Then, what are the consequences? Then, it produces a lot of data. We looked into potential solution with edge computing. Now, edge computing has problems. Now, blockchain can solve the problems of edge computing. Blockchain has problems. So, what we can do? So, if we go back to the challenge of blockchain, you can see there are issues with scalability, and as you can see, due to its nature of decentralization, shared databases, and smart contract cryptographic security, it requires a huge amount of power to compute all those consensus protocols and other technical stuff which is under the hood operations. All this requires a lot of power. So what can be the potential solution? Now, I'm not going to give you the exact solution which will solve all the problems, but we can connect the dots. As a researcher, as an academic, my job is to investigate what might be the potential solution or what we can look into in terms of a probable solution or their effectiveness. Now, up until now, we talked about edge computing, IoT, ransomware attacks, and blockchain. Now, edge computing and blockchain, both of these techniques are really interesting, and we can see the revenues, the usage are highly demanding. But still, both edge computing and blockchain has got their own issues. So we need to think of something whether we can have a synergistic approach. So if we look at the problems, edge computing is vulnerable because it is basically expanding the threat landscape. Blockchain requires a lot of power, computationally demanding. So if we bring in blockchain into the edge, so what happens? Edge computing becomes more secure, more private, and it can be more optimized in terms of resourcing. And if we bring the concept of edge into the blockchain, we don't really have the problem of computation because we have lots of computing devices now, we have lots of storage, and we have lots of decentralization. So just imagine if we can think blockchain and edge together as a synergy, we can solve a lot of problems up until now. And going back to the original problems of ransomware attack and healthcare security, yes, we can address those issues. So what are the requirements for this synergistic approach? Yes, we are solving the problem of decentralization, security, and power with the combination of edge and blockchain. But we are again doing some mistakes. What are those mistakes? We are forgetting how to conduct authentication, whether we can have the adaptability issues solved or not, because when we'd be looking at the synergistic approach, the blockchain would require huge computation, but the edge computing devices, whether they are ready to handle or address those computationally demanding jobs or not. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of adaptability. And there are a lot more intricacies associated with this problem. So we need to make sure that there are adaptability in blockchain and edge computing synergy. What about the network? We think, okay, we can just bring in the blockchain and edge computing together, but how the network looks like then? It becomes increasingly complex, and we have to keep on working to solve those problems. What about the reliability and the integrity of the data we have? Because once we put together lots of devices and lots of layers and lots of technical intricacies and cryptography, smart contract, consensus, and lots of computing devices. It becomes more and more complex. And now, doing all this together, if we go back to the original problem of data quality and the quality of service with the big data from Internet of Things, are we still able to provide low latency or not? Or we are creating more and more problems just by combining blockchain and edge computing together. It becomes more tiresome and more sluggish. So all these issues, we need to keep on working towards the ideal solution. That's our goal for years to come. And as you have seen, by 2025, we are going to see almost $20 billion revenue in terms of blockchain usage. So yes, this is a light at the end of the tunnel we can see. Because if we look back, all the problems we had, to solve one of these problems, we bring in a new technology, but this technology comes at a price. It has got some problems. Then again, we try to patch those problems and we bring in another technology. This is just like a chain reaction. And to solve all these, we have to look at some of the synergistic approaches. And that's what we're looking at now. But still, this synergistic approach requires a lot of stuff to be perfectly handled. And that's what we have just discussed now. So if we can do this right, probably we are going to see a number of solutions and a better internet in coming years. Now, I've talked about blockchain, edge computing, the problems with internet, IoT devices, healthcare, ransomware, and whatnot. Remember, I talked about the network issues with the synergistic approach. What about 5G? In majority of the areas in this world, 5G is not yet fully operational. So if 5G is not fully operational, how we are going to see a global synergistic approach with blockchain and edge computing? And at the same time, when we try to embrace 5G, 5G also comes at a price. Are we cyber ready with 5G? Why? Because 5G is software driven. It's not just a bunch of physical towers and everything happens with those physical hardware. It's not like that. Here we have software driven network, and the internet speed is almost 100 times than 4G, and response time is 400 times than 4G. So imagine, we talked about the synergy, but if this is not adaptable, if one blockchain node is in a region where 5G is not operational, and the other node is somewhere where 6G is coming, so what happens? It becomes more and more complex. And this is an optimization problem we need to solve. And not to mention the cyber attacks by rogue nation states, capitalizing the speed of 5G and 6G. So blockchain is considered to solve a number of problems. However, in reality, blockchain is not the solution of every problem. The realistic use case I can see based on my research and my investigation, I can think of blockchain as synergistic approach as a protection from the ransomware. So imagine, just to give you a very high level idea, what happens in ransomware attacks. You just really worry about the data you have in your computing device, which is now encrypted by the cyber criminals. Now imagine a situation where you have multiple copies with your shared nodes or your shared participants or peer-to-peer network. I don't really care what happens to this device. I can have exact same data somewhere else, which I can easily access. So the ransomware attackers, they just walk away with the data. They have no idea what to do. Yes, you can say they might blackmail you. They might leak your data. Who cares? I mean, if the victim is not cooperating or giving any consent to the cyber terrorist, if they are not obeying the rules set by the cyber terrorists or cyber criminals, then all these impacts will be vanished. The financial gain, the $57 investment, they are working out with $14,000 plus money. All this will vanish overnight. If we can connect all the dots, if we can have a proper synergistic approach, if we can solve all the red tapes with this synergistic approach, we can see this number one cyber attack is vanishing all of a sudden. I know it might be very ambitious to say as of 2022, but we can see this is coming to an end in the next couple of years, and if we can play our cards right. But still, I mean, we still don't know that what might happen in future. In this approach, we are still having some issues. Let's say the 51% attack in blockchain network. What if more than 50% nodes are controlled by the cyber criminals? That is possible. If the cyber criminals can play their cards right, what about the government regulations? Are we having any support from the government agencies, or no matter what we do, is it being legalized? Are we going to see an increasing incorporation of blockchain technology in our everyday affairs? Is our credentials, is our passports, is our driver's license are all stored via this blockchain and edge computing? It depends on how the government works. And we have different viewpoints from different nations, different countries. So as long as we are residing in the internet, and if the government policies are not aligned, then no matter what we are doing, nothing will work. And there are many other red tapes. So in a nutshell, what I can say is, yes, this is a maze. And as researcher, as cybersecurity professionals, someone who is internet enthusiast, or everyone who uses computing devices, for every single one of us, this is just like a maze. And we have to continuously work together to solve this maze. So I'll finish with one of the famous dialogues from Albert Einstein. If we knew what we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? So in a nutshell, what I can tell you is, if we knew that from the beginning of our research, the design of internet, the design of the healthcare ecosystem, if we knew there would have been lots of cyber attacks, we would have designed in different ways, but we didn't do it. And we are continuously working to solve all these issues, and that's why we are researching. So that's all about my talk, and I hope you will find this somewhat interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, here at Edith County University, we have a security research institute, and we are really interested to expand our collaboration network. And if you are finding my research interesting, this particular topic interesting, feel free to reach out. So that's all from myself, and I will take a few questions. It has been a very long day for me, and as you can imagine, it's almost 9:15 p.m. in Australia. So Shilpa, I'll just leave it to you, and you can just share the questions.
Yes, thank you so much for an informative session, Dr. Mohi, and our attendees share the same sentiments. If you are interested to learn more about our programs, do let us know in the poll that's going to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training, and we will reach out to you. Dr. Mohi, shall we start with the Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. So our first question is by Mulalam. What is the concept of big data?
Okay, so just to give you a very high level idea about big data. So in traditional sense, no matter what we do, these are creating some data. But since we are using a lots of internet connected devices or computing devices, all these devices are creating a lot of data. For example, if you just look back to your own personal devices, you can have a smartwatch, you can have a smart glass, you can have a laptop, a desktop, you can have an iPad, you can have your smart keys, and you can have a smartphone and whatnot. So imagine one particular individual is using on average 5 to 10 devices. And all these devices have certain storage capacities and computing power. And all these devices are connected to the cloud server where these collected data are analyzed. Just to give you a simple example, if you just use your smartphone, it tracks your steps. If you use a smartwatch, it tracks your blood pressure and a lot more about your health. So all these data are transferred to your preferred manufacturer's cloud server. All this data gets analyzed and then it sends back to your device. And you can see you have walked 15,000 steps today. You have walked 2-3 kilometers today. So how these are happening? They are collecting a huge amount of data. And when we look at this data, these are not the normal data size. We have seen from kilobytes to petabytes or zettabytes. So that's the concept behind big data. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out via email.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohi, for answering that question. Our next question is by Datta. What exactly is an edge computing, and any example of edge computing?
That is a very good question. So in the previous question's answer, I have told you that all the data we have from our computing devices, all this data is traveling from our device to the cloud computing facilities where all this data are stored and analyzed, and then we can see the results back in our devices or our screens. Now, if you try to imagine that from the edge computing's perspective, so instead of going to the central cloud repository, if we really want low latency and if we really want to see the results instantly, we need to have something nearby to our computing devices, which can give us the results as quickly as possible. So imagine our smartwatches cloud server is sitting somewhere, let's say in Africa. So from Australia to Africa, it takes a long time, I mean, from microsecond perspective. So imagine having the same cloud server sitting nearby to our computing devices. Let's say I live in Western Australia and that cloud server is residing somewhere in Western Australia. Don't you think that the results we need would be quicker because the data needs to travel less path and it gets analyzed in nearby devices and you can see the results instantly? Just to give you a more realistic example, so if let's say if you are watching Netflix in India and Netflix headquarters is somewhere in US, so if you think that your contents from Netflix are traveling all the way from US to India, then don't you think that it would lag and delay? So instead of storing the contents for Netflix India in US, you can see lots of servers or edge computing facilities in India. And that makes your Netflix India service quality and your video quality much better. If it were coming from US to India, it could have been, let's say, 480p. But now, since this is in India, you can see high definition 4K HD. That's the simplest possible way to think of edge computing. And it really depends on the application. And it really depends on the context, depends on the usage, depends on the users. So if you are small to medium enterprise, you might not worry about the edge computing because you might have a very small customer base or client base. you don't really need that real-time services. But if we think edge computing from the context of, let's say, healthcare, a mission critical situation, or battlefield aviation where drones are being used for battlefield reconnaissance, we need real-time updates and real-time data. In those cases, yes, we need better edge computing facilities, and based on those demands and applications, every enterprise have their own version of edge computing facilities. So I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Dr. Mohi. I'll take last two questions for the day. Our next question is by Datta again. Is edge computing and CDN, that is content delivery network, exactly the same or both are still different?
I mean, you can think of the content delivery networks as an example of edge computing, but again, as I said earlier, it depends on the application, it depends on the usage, it depends on how you are solving your problem with edge computing. So in traditional content delivery networks, what you see is just in terms of content optimization, in terms of content delivery, in terms of a particular type of content which needs to be delivered to an user, to an entity, or a group of people, or an enterprise. But in terms of edge computing, we really focus on the data storage, analysis, collection, and everything together. So yes, you can think of edge computing and content delivery networks similar entities, but I would say there are slight differences. Edge computing is more on computation of the data of nearby devices, whereas content delivery networks are more on delivering the stored contents or things you're looking for. As simple as that.
Thank you, Dr. Mohi, for answering that question. Our
And the
last
last
question.
question.
Yeah. Uh, what is the best or efficient way to backing up this large data being generated by rapid integration of this endpoint devices?
Well, you just need to ask yourself the question, is it for personal purpose or is it for business purpose? So if I'm assuming this is for business purpose, based on your business, based on your operations, based on your sensitivity and classification of data, you should follow the appropriate standards framework. So you can think of some of these cybersecurity frameworks like Essential 8, ISO 27000. There are plenty of cybersecurity policy frameworks. So again, it depends on what type of data you have. Is it top secret, or is it like personal? Is it like classified, confidential? What type of data you are trying to back up? And depending on that, yes, there are plenty of solutions available in those endpoint devices. You can ask any vendor, any security provider. There are plenty of supercomputing and data analysis support providing companies. So you can pick the most reliable ones. I'm not going to brand them, but based on your context, you can pick whichever is going to give you the best possible services, and also whether you want to spend a lot of money or your budget is limited. It depends totally on your context. But if you really want to solve the problem of data backup, I would say try multiple places apart from these cloud servers and cloud computing facilities and the other service providers. Try to have your own backup in your own storage devices. As simple as that.
Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, Dr. Mohi, for answering those questions and for the great presentation and the knowledge shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Before we conclude the webinar, Dr. Mohi, would you like to give a small message to our audiences, please?
Well, I mean, as I said, I'm really humbled to share my knowledge with you. But as I really want to solve the number one cybercrime in the world, as you have seen in the statistics, try to make sure that you not only think of the cybersecurity of your devices, because our family members, our friends, everyone uses smartphone, everyone uses computing devices which are connected to the internet. So try to practice the social awareness about cybersecurity. If we don't really do that, who knows, our friends and families might be the victim of next ransomware attack, and we'll have nothing else to do. So just to save ourselves from this notorious cybercrime, apart from practicing the cyber hygiene by ourselves, we also need to encourage our friends and families, our mom and dads, our siblings, or I mean anyone you care about. So it's not just about our devices; it's also about our peers, friends, and families. So try to focus more on raising cyber hygiene practices and awareness. That's all
Thank
I
you
wanted
so
to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for the message to our audiences, Dr. Mohi. Now, before we end the session, I would like to announce our next Cyber Talk session, Secure and Resilient Public Services, which is scheduled for September 12th. This session is an expert presentation by Michelle Mayo, Managing Director and Senior Security Executive, North America Public Services Security Lead. To register for this session, please do go visit our website www.eccu.edu/cybertalks. The link is given in the chat section. Hope to see you all on September 12th. With this, we end the session. You may now disconnect your lines. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohi.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.